My dog.
Your dog, right? Yeah.
Amazing. We are good to
We're
go.
live.
Yes.
Awesome.
Howdy, beautiful humans. Welcome to the third episode of the Embodied podcast. Today we're here with our good friend Massimo. He's part of, we're co-creating our men's circle together. And so Massimo is a sexologist, NLP practitioner, CEO coach, very loving individual, also a loving dog owner. So he's just had a thing with his dog, so that there may be things coming up. But yeah, Massimo, super nice to have you here. Good to see you, man.
There's two delays.
Interesting.
Ooh.
Where did the
Can you hear the same thing?
For me, it's like super sleek.
Let's talk. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but when Toby speaks, it comes through twice, and then when I speak, I can hear myself twice.
I'm gonna mute myself.
That's super interesting. So it's still the same scenario, you know. Is it all good on your end now?
It's coming through twice.
Still?
Yeah.
That's really annoying. And if I mute myself?
It's a long delay. Yeah.
Are you having the other website open where we do this streaming? Because maybe if you have like the YouTube thing open, it may have just started. That's why you hear like the thing streamed and...
Maybe you're watching your own live stream.
No. Talk now?
Hello, Massimo?
All of a sudden, it went.
Woo! Boom. Okay. Awesome.
We're good.
Let's do it.
We're good.
So yeah, the topic for today's podcast is around the Enigmatic Man. And it seems that like all these little things will begin to actually make sense when we get into the topic, as Massimo will unpack this a bit more. But we always start with the question, Massimo, like, what is it that moves you at your core? Like, what is your essence? Like, what is the work that you want to put into the world?
Very, very good question. I went into this industry to help, and I think it's quite a. I think in the initial stages, it's quite a cliched sort of statement. You know, you become a therapist to help people. Yes, of course, there's the inevitability of that. But for practicing, I think over 18 years, it's gotten to a point that the relationship that I share with my clients is such a loving, emotionally near, experientially near moment that I share with them, that it's almost carrying the burden with them, sharing that burden with them, and seeing them get to a place where they do become a little bit enigmatic for that. You know, there is a versatility to them and a joy in them which was never there before, and that's become such a purpose for me that it kind of feeds into everything. So it's like, even if I go and get a coffee to try and sort of leave the barista feeling better, it's really taken a long time to get to that point and actually realize that absolutely everything is about love fundamentally. And if I can use my vehicle of delivery being therapy, the coaching, the work that I do, as getting that across and helping people really be able to cultivate their self-image and sexual self-image, and be immersed in that, really own that space, that's a driving force for me, 110%.
I love that, man. So it would be really good if you can unpack a little bit more, like, what do you mean by enigmatic man?
When I got into, well, let me backtrack a little bit. So when I arrived to London, it was, I think, the peak of the pickup industry. And you go out, you meet a bunch of guys, and it's about learning how to pick up women, and you're learning all these skills fundamentally, and you have sort of this feedback of going, this is what you need to do to sort of adjust yourself so that you're more presentable, you can speak better, you can hold a space better, you can do all these things. And there was interaction that I had one day, and this woman called me a chameleon. And I went and I explored this sort of idea a little bit more, and I questioned her a little bit as well. And it was almost sort of this feeling of being a little bit proud about it, that she couldn't put her finger on me, like put me in a box. And that's what kind of gave rise to this idea of the enigmatic man for me. It's someone who, it's a little bit like the Riddler. Because if you look at the word itself, it actually comes from a word to speak in riddles. And I think in the initial stages, it was very much about what I could achieve from the world, what I could get from the world, what I could get from people. So it's like, this really kind of feeds into that whole pickup industry's mentality. I want to get the girl, right? The thing. And then later on, it started meaning something entirely different. It's become, I guess, this conflict between knowledge and wisdom. You learn to be wise with all the different things that you learn. The versatility of that chameleon-like state. Whereas in the initial stages, you kind of have that as a bit of an armor, so people can't really penetrate and see you and really explore who you are. And then later on, it means really being able to explore all these avenues and be open and loving with whoever you decide that to be with. So it's very different for a lot of people, I think.
I love that. My first step into personal development was also the pickup world, and it did me a lot of good, but also I need to unlearn some stuff in the later years. One thing that I like, this new version of the enigmatic man, what came up for me was being infinite, the notion that we are infinite beings. How would you relate infinity with the enigmatic man?
I think I would connect that with a greater or heightened level of consciousness and conscientiousness as a man, and realizing that we have such responsibility in everything that we do. And Toby and I speak about the idea of penetration a lot, and the masculine penetrates the world, and this idea of the enigmatic man is the man who can penetrate all situations conscientiously. And I always sort of liken it to penetrating a woman. You're not just going to shove it in, you're going to press yourself in. There's going to be that invitation, welcoming in. It has to be this unconscious exchange, but then conscious exchange. And for me, I think the word consciousness is something very important in relation to that, because I no longer give myself the out of an excuse. If I've done something wrong, I own it. If I've offended, I own it. Whichever way it goes, there has to be that responsibility of, I like your word, more infinite than anything else. You're a superpower fundamentally. And if I am fully responsible of that, I know where it's going to impact things. I know how it's going to impact things. And that's also where I think this idea of the enigmatic man is one who's able to hold that space for himself as well, in knowing when the right time is to act, to hold yourself back, to sit with, to relate with differently. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it was actually really interesting because when you earlier spoke about the chameleon thing, it's something I want to come back to for a moment. I mean, even like when we relate it to sort of the world of business, for example, there's like some interesting studies that it's all about psychological safety, basically. And when you don't feel safe in your workplace, and you basically use 40% of your energy to suppress parts of your being. And so when you spoke about this chameleon aspect, it's something that really resonated with me, because I felt for lots of my life that I was very much adjusting myself to different circumstances, but coming from a place of like always feeling of like hiding parts of myself. But then I at some point became more and more aware that I used the word like adaptability, that I feel early on in life, I used it basically as a skill to sort of like hide something in order to keep parts of myself safe that I felt weren't safe with people at times. But then the growing awareness, and you spoke about consciousness as well, of becoming conscious of like, yeah, this chameleon-like ability can be like an armor, but then it also can be this vehicle for some real deep empathy and being able to connect with effectively anyone. And that's what I'm seeing more and more now, where it's like, wow, actually, I can become this bridge builder, because I'm able to speak to this person and basically adjust myself so that I can view the world from their perspective, but I can also do it from the other side. And so I feel there's this like real beauty that basically what was once a weakness can become a strength. And at least to me, it seems like all it takes is level of consciousness or level of awareness that we have these abilities, and then depending on context, strength or weakness is not really a strength or weakness. It depends on in what context do you have that ability.
It's I think the word relatability or relationship is also something very important in relation to the concept, because my relational style now is being with, so relating with the person rather than relating to the person, so that there's this separateness. But then I think also another word which I think is also very important is this striving towards authenticity. And I think when a lot of men kind of go on this path of strengthening all these sort of different parts of themselves, there's a level of inauthenticity about it. It's once again about the gain that we get from that, rather than the ability to give. And the closer you get to your truth, the more authentic you become, and the more surrendered you are to that. And I think, that's also another word which is very important for me, is the ability to surrender to what I am. And I also know that identity is going to change over a period of time, but being okay with that.
Can you go deeper on this, like focus on gain versus giving? I think that
Sure.
That's really, really important, I think, on that like masculinity journey.
When we engage sexually unconsciously, what are we doing? We're taking, right? We're penetrating, we're using a body in front of us, we're self-gratifying. And please don't take me wrong, there is real joy and amazing feelings that come with that, and it's not about squashing the experience. But I think that experience in itself is very different to the mindset of the man who goes into a sexual relationship about giving and being with and immersing themselves in the love, the passion, the compassion, the weirdness, the rhythm of the other, all these different things. And that to me just seems like a man who is fuller, richer in their ability of actually not only making the other person feel held, but it also makes the person feel far more potent in the world, far more powerful. And it's not attached to an ego. This is the thing that I think we need to sort of separate as well, because I think the initial stages of, I get the woman, I penetrate, I do all these different things, that feeds in with the ego. It's about taking. Whereas the further we move away from that sort of state, that ego state, that egocentric drive, that's where we're far more open in being able to give. You know, it's like there's, if you draw the contrast, the feminine is always seen as the giver, right? It's always the one that is birthing something. But we also have to remember that we have femininity in us as well, and we have to cultivate that equally as much as our masculinity. And I guess when I think of this idea of the enigmatic man as well, it's the complete enmeshment of both. It's no longer, is it about the masculine, is it about the feminine? They are so hand in hand, codependent, and healthy codependent on one another, that gives that fully rounded feel to that individual.
I think what's fascinating there is that when you were speaking about the relationship map by Christopher Barnes, and this whole thing where there's like the immature feminine, the immature masculine, and then the mature feminine and mature masculine, where I think there sort of like in the masculine piece, it was about like the masculine is bestowing, and it's sort of that sense of stewardship, like once we're actually moving out of boyhood into manhood, basically being like, yeah, we are givers, we are like, yeah, creators of environments in which others can flourish. And so really that stewardship idea is, I think, really, really big for me in that space.
And I think I resonate a lot with the idea of being that provider as well. And I know that there is that social construct that, men are the providers, and there is that stance, but both play a vital role in that providership, if there is such a word. I just think that, while you were talking, I was thinking about how that sort of transition from boyhood into manhood, who does that for us? For me personally, I'll be very honest, I've never really had masculine figures in my life that I've gone, this is the kind of epitome of masculinity that I want to look up to, that inspires me to be like that. It was always a conflict in masculinity. So for me, I think the moment that I started really turning to literature, written text, the abundance of different truths out there, that was when things started changing for me. But because now this is so easily accessible for a lot of men, and many can sort of tap into these kind of things, there does need to be more of a challenge to other men, and actually going, you need to look at this, you need to listen to this. And this is where I think it's a collective responsibility for all of us as men and on this journey to try and get that message across as well.
I really love that. And I also strongly feel that, I just like, I notice for myself more and more, I'm quite a feminine man. I didn't notice that. Also, because I was in the pickup world, I was constantly doing masculine things, but my essence was way more feminine and masculine. And it's one. Everyone has both. It's so true. Now, still, I know the role of men is also changing in the world. And you were talking, both Toby and you are doing man circles together. I just want to, for all the listeners here that never experienced a man circle before, or never heard the term, or maybe heard it, but what value does it give? I know it's very important. I've been to some, I loved it, but I want to hear from you, like, what value does a man circle give? Why should men go there?
I'll speak about my experience, and not as a facilitator. I'd like to generalize that most men are actually deep down inside afraid of other men. And what I mean by that is that we're often afraid of showing ourselves to other men and really bearing it all and exposing whatever comes up. And I think what men's circles for me have provided me in particular is a space that I can be anything I want to be.
I'll share a little bit of my experience, like in that space. So I feel it for me has a lot to do with being challenged and also like held accountable. And I think also the energy in these spaces for me often is more, it's more building in a way. There's something, yeah, it has this like interesting like brotherhood sense, but then also kind of like tough love at times, where it's like, dude, like, are you actually like seriously pursuing this or not? You know, like you've been speaking about this, so maybe it's time to do it. And so it's I think this this space to yeah, be challenged to act. And this, especially for me, I feel at times I'm very much into sort of these planes of abstract thought and possibility. And so I find men's circles have that space of yeah, making it more tangible and being challenged to actually move the thought into actualization. I actually feel this often also with my partner, that she kind of like challenges me on that as well. And so I mean, for me, I see sort of like the feminine, I find, is very much that force that makes ideas come into like being in the world. But then I think men's circles have a like similar effect on me. And yeah, it's also really good to be able to I think speak with others about partnerships and seeing where there's like potentially like common threads. And also I think to Massimo's point earlier, what I begin to see more and more like through being part of men's circles is that it's really learning my role as a like provider and giver and steward of like the partnership, but then also like the family that arises from that. So it, I think, gives inner strength to me, where I don't know, in my previous partnership, I definitely noticed that can be easily, that the boundaries can be too blurred in a way. And so I think being in these men's circles, it creates a sense of individuality that I then can bring back into my partnership, which is, yeah, bringing a new level of spice in a way.
That is beautiful. I really love that gives to you. Also, for people that are watching right now, Massimo's dog is a little bit sick, right? So he is right now helping his beautiful dog, and super adaptable in that.
So sorry, you're gonna have to give me 5 minutes if that's okay.
Of course. Yeah.
You want to share in the meantime, Phil, what's your experience from being part of a number of these men's circles?
I had beautiful experience with men's circles. Men from all ages, like 18 until in their 50s, came together to discuss and to be in our manlyhood. So some exercises and things we did there were really personal and really primal as well. It really came back to the primal energy of what it means to be this, which was beautiful and freeing. And other moments it was very emotional, and like topics that I never discussed with other men were discussed there. And that was for me so beautiful. And I already had some of my outlets in place, but there were people in the room that never expressed that ever, and that was sometimes such a freeing release. And we were all there for him to experience that release. And it's in a day of, in a couple hours, it changed people in a beautiful way, in becoming more okay with it, becoming less ashamed with it, because yeah, like a lot of people are very confused, if we only go back, what is it, maybe 50, 60 years, the roles were very set in a way, but now the world is so different, and it's getting more equal, and I like that. I really, I'm a big fan of women at the top, and even the matriarchy. I'm a big fan of a matriarchy, but that changes the role for us, so, and as soon as I really would like, I'm very big fan for women to take their power back, and I love that. I love that movement, but that changes our role, and there's a lot of confusion there. And to speak with that, and to come back to your core and feel where you're at, and to have a outlet for that is very beautiful. And I know a lot of people that don't have a friend group that those things are discussed. So that was one of the biggest experiences for me, like, wow, it's very important, this work. So, because it is confusing. We don't even, sometimes the confusion isn't even conscious. It's just subconscious, that we sometimes don't know what to do, or don't know what to say, or don't know how to handle our relationship. She is always mad or unsatisfied. I have no clue why. And they don't have a friend group to talk with that. And something like such a circle is beautiful. And I had a very, very positive experience with it. It was very vulnerable, and it was beautiful. It freed people up. It freed me up. It freed all the people in the room, became freer at the end of such a session. So that's my experience, and I love it. I can highly recommend it to anyone. Also for people who already feel they have figured it out in a way. Still, then it's good to what you were sharing. I felt that as well, that camaraderie, that almost like this family feeling of, hey, we're here to support. We're all going to stuff, and we're here to support each other, and that's beautiful.
I think there's an intentionality about these spaces for me, where it's, and it often, I think, also triggers like different conversations than just with friends, because I feel like I come with a different mindset. And I mean, I guess I'm in general a person that really likes deep conversation. I get bored with just like chit chat and like small talk shit. So I feel I tend to have in general like more like deep conversations anyway. But then going to these circles, it's what I definitely noticed previously in my life. I felt my intimate partner was always the person that kind of like knew me best. But now by creating some men's circles on my own, I feel I'm basically building these two areas where I have this like intense connection with the feminine, which is like in my intimate relationship, but then also like this intimate connection with the masculine, which is like comes through men's circles or the conversations that I have like with Massimo. And so it's really lovely to have that equilibrium in a way, and power on both sides.
Yeah, that's amazing. I like that. I'm also very happy Massimo is back. How is your dog doing?
Dude, he's not doing very well. Thank God one of our friends is a vet down the road. So my girlfriend has taken him down quickly. He's unfortunately going into shock. So.
Wow.
All the best to the little man.
Yeah, I was listening to that what you guys were saying, and it mixes everything. I think one of the things also is that it's, and what I find with a lot of the men that I work with, they don't have their own space. There was a video a little while back, I don't know if you guys saw it, where this woman basically destroyed this guy's PlayStation. And it's in this whole sort of theme of jokes and whatnot and everything like that. And the guy was absolutely distraught. He was almost on the verge of tears and going. And the one thing that he said was, "This is the only thing I have that's mine," right? And there was something so profound about that, because it was kind of like when I look at men's groups, and the moment men take ownership of that space, it becomes theirs. And there's nothing that can be taken away from that, which is so powerful.
That's so true. I love that. I have one personal question for you, Massimo, because embodied is also about metrics, and about how to measure what we preach. And if we just go in a little imaginary thought experience, and we're 10, 20 years in the future, we have some very fancy future glasses on. And in those future glasses, there are some metrics. In the corner of our eye, we can see like, hey, what is our heart rate variability? What is our thing? Now, what thing would you like? And it can be something that's not measurable yet, but what thing would you like to have there? What statistic or what future about yourself would you like to have measured and just see in your corner, like, oh, this is how I'm doing?
That's a great question. I would say, for me, I know we're kind of getting to that flow state. That's one thing. But I think something that's probably more important for me and what life has shown me is being in a state of being humble, grounded. And I guess the metric that I would probably want is, I don't know, maybe just something that's sort of showing me, am I in sort of more of a narcissistic state right now, or am I more in an empathic state? And being able to sort of have something that shows me where the optimum level is, because sometimes we do need a little bit of a narcissism in us. We do need that ego drive that sort of, is a little bit more protective of us. So something that sort of shows me that scale of where I am, especially from an ability of relating out to people.
That's cool. I would love to have that too. That's cool.
And it's quite interesting when you say like sometimes it's really good to have the bit of that like narcissistic like ego drive, and other times it's like really good to be humble. I love that you bring that sort of like contextualization. It depends on the environment. It's kind of like the way what I see in most of your answers. It's like, yeah, kind of it depends. Depends, like what's the context? And then like what is the response? And I really love that, because it's not like, yeah, this is like best practice, always be like that. But it's like, okay, assess, listen, and then respond.
I probably mentioned before, but one of the phrases, I think it was Roger that came up with it, is that we're always working in our potentiality. And I love that, because who I was yesterday is someone I'm no longer. And it's always the next day showing that there's going to be a new kind of potential that I can be leaning in towards. And with that comes a hell of a lot of acceptance, because, there's a lot of, okay, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's amazing being in an empathic state all the time, because you really feel the depths of whatever's going on in that human interaction. But it's not always healthy. So there has to be that sort of being able to pull back to some kind of midpoint for you. Where is your optimum? And I mentioned before about flow. It's like my flow point is probably very different from your flow point. And that's something that I think the more you are engaged in this practice, the more you start realizing, there it is, it's there. It's just on the rev counter, just at the perfect point, just that biting point, and I know exactly what that feels like. The difficulty is replicating it.
Yeah, dude, where do people connect with you, man? to get deeper into your work. And I mean, yeah, we do the men's circle together, but then there's also other ways that people can be part of your world, man.
Absolutely, but I would really push for the men's circle if men are actually wanting to get involved, because not only because it's ours, but because it offers something very special. And speaking from a position of facilitating lots of groups and seeing groups sort of unfolding, and each one has sort of their special nature. There's something very unique about what's sort of being held or presented for the men that we work with. But other than that, it's my website, massimo.love, or on Instagram, massimo.stocchi-Fontana. Those are pretty much the best places, because you can see a lot of my writing, the way that I think. But then I have something I also absolutely love is when I get random people just asking me questions. So the door is always open, basically.
Yeah, and when we'll get to the Q&A piece like in 4 minutes. But yeah, Phil, did you want to like ask the last question before we move into that space?
The home run. Yes. This is yes. How can people really feel and embody what you are teaching and how you are helping people? How can people right now sitting at home feel or embody what you are teaching?
There's probably two positions that I come from. The one is speaking about truth, and then the other position is defensiveness that comes up. Now, defensiveness for me is always something very important, because it highlights we have something that we have to grow through. So in part of that embodying process, it's also being very attentive to what triggers you. Because for me, at least, I've convinced myself of this, and it's really served me well. Whenever I'm triggered by something, there's something that I have to do there. There's work that I have to do there. And, you know, I know we've spoken about a lot of concepts, and in many ways, they're also very philosophical concepts. So it's also trying to see what experiences you can cultivate for yourself with a real sense of urgency, because if you don't have that urgency, you just coast. You just, you know, you go from one experience to the next. But when there is that sort of I want to get up in the morning and I want to face the world and I want to see what else is going to present itself to me, that in itself is going to have you integrate something into your life. And I mean, if there is going to be that takeaway, it's always be the eternal student more than anything else, because, you know, it's like we're having a three-way conversation here, and each three of us has such unique worldviews. How much can we learn just with being in our presence and just having these conversations? I would probably say that's where I would steer them.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you.
Amazing. So being eternal students and engaging in the dialogues, which we'll do, we'll end the live stream. Thanks everyone for being part thus far. And so under the video, there is just the piece to reveal the Zoom link for the Q&A. So if you want to click on that, then yeah, see you there in a moment. Lots of love.
My apologies again.
Yeah, the dog, man. I think we have a bit of like a history, like last week when we had the call with Susan. She was like needing to run out for her mom. Today you with your dog. I'm curious to see what happens in the coming weeks. It seems like there's a bit of a history. Alrighty, we'll see.